Greetings and welcome to Yoga for your MDM, using your MDM to support flexible and student-centered learning options. The pandemic has taught us many things, including how important it is to support flexible and student-centered learning. We all found ourselves scrambling March of 2019 to provide quality education in the midst of this global crisis. All of us probably had to turn on a dime from in-person learning to at-home learning. The Jamf MDM can do more than just deploy, inventory, set up, and control devices. So using your Jamf MDM, you can create an environment where students can determine how, what, when, and where they are learning. I am so excited to be part of Team TNC and be here with my partner, Tracy Joyce. Tracy, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Joyce. I am a sales engineer at Jamf, and I have a lot of things in common with my partner, Christina, the other half of TNC. One of them being I was an educator for over 22 years, and I've done everything from classroom teaching to media specialist to here's a few carts of iPads, set them up for the students on a dime. So I'm really excited to share some of the things that Jamf can do for you if you find yourself in a situation like that.
I too am a 22 plus year veteran of K-12 education, starting in the classroom, moving to guidance counseling, then circling back full circle to instructional technologist. I've also been a principal and supervisor of instructional technology. Both Tracy and I have both been Jamf admins, so we would love to share with you our knowledge from the K-12 world as it relates to the Jamf MDM and creating these flexible and student-centered learning options. So Tracy, tell our audience what we will be learning today.
All right, so we're going to start off just a little high-level overview of what an MDM does and what it can do for you. We're going to then hit on what are flexible learning environments and how can we create those with Jamf. And then we're going to talk more about student-centered learning. What is this student-centered learning thing that we're talking about? We're going to hit on 3 different case studies of different learning situations that Jamf specifically can help you set up to make for your students, make available for your students and your teachers.
Awesome. So what exactly is an MDM, excuse me?
So we know that an MDM is something that you can use to deploy your devices. There's lots of features to it. But what we'd like you to do today is to leave here with the knowledge that your MDM is not just something you set it and forget, like a slow cooker. We're no longer living in that world. We're living in a world where we need to be limber and flexible, more like your yoga practice. We need to be able to think of the needs of our end users and consider them when we are utilizing all the tools that are available in both Jamf Pro and Jamf School.
So we're now going to look at...
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So we're now going to look at some of those MDM considerations. First being deployment. Tracy?
All right. So when we are first deciding on what MDM you're going to use or how you're going to get your devices out into the hands of your users. So that is really the most important part. We need to figure out how are we going to get whatever it is. Is it iPads? Is it MacBook Pros? How are we going to get them to our end users? The next thing you're going to want to do with your MDM is inventory them. We need to be able to see at a glance who has which device. It's super important that we are able to inventory all of our devices.
Then, of course, we have configurations when you're setting up these devices with settings and those infamous restrictions that you need. Management commands when you need to lock those devices for whatever reasons, whether it's instructional or security, updating them, clearing passcodes, lost mode, and clearing that pesky activation lock. App deployment is a big one for us as well. Using your Apple School Manager and your Apple Business Manager accounts, these features allow you to purchase apps in volume, tax-free if your organization qualifies, and it gives you the power to scope them to your devices as needed.
Great. And we all know that student security and privacy is on the top of everyone's mind right now. And JAMF is already the biggest complement to Apple's already existing security and privacy features. And you can use your MDM to lock down those devices and make sure that they're safe for your students to use. And then last, something that we like to call empowering applications. This is any app that your end user uses to set the stage for themselves and their learning. And with one of them, for example, is JAMF Self-Service. In Pro, you can create, it's kind of like your own app store available just for your teachers and students to be able to download onto their computers and make it as personalized as possible. Our other MDM empowered applications available with JAMF School are JAMF Teacher and Student and Parent. And we're going to talk a lot about how you can use those to create that personalized learning environment for your students.
So what exactly is student learning? Well, student-centered learning is when the students can determine how, when, what, and where they learn. So let's think back to spring of 2019 or even today when you have students either learning completely remotely or those that are in a situation where you have teachers that are in the classroom with students, but some of their students are at home. The students that are home may need to access home Wi-Fi. They may need to go to their public library or Starbucks or McDonald's, some free Wi-Fi source. JAMF MDMs allow you the flexibility for any of these options. The students don't need to wait. They just need the Wi-Fi. And there again, the question of if you have eSIMs and your organization has afforded you that, no worries. JAMF can handle that as well. So the students have a choice as to when they want to learn because once the device is connected, it is always available to them. How and what comes into play because the teacher could have loaded a pre-recorded video. An iBook could have been pushed out by IT, or if this is a JAMF teacher issued instruction material, it could have been loaded by the teacher, or it could have been an app that was placed in the self-service empowerment app, as we like to call them, for either the teacher or staff member of your organization. So again, student-centered learning, students determine how, what, when, and where they learn.
Great, Christina. Thanks for that. The next part of our conversation here is flexible learning environments. We are no longer in a scenario where it is one teacher teaching the same subject or the same topic to all of the students who are self-contained in a classroom all at the same time. Life is just not that predictable right now. So we have put together a couple of different scenarios of flexible learning environments that we're going to talk about and share with you today. And all of these that we're going to be talking about today are things that Christina and I have experienced in our K-12 experience before coming to work for JAMF. So the first one would be a shared cart situation. So this is where you have one cart of devices. This was exactly my case. I had two carts of devices that were to be shared between our K through 3 classrooms, and then another set of devices that were to be shared with our fourth and fifth grade students. That is the shared cart scenario. And then we have one-to-one. So a lot of schools moved to one-to-one when the pandemic happened because they needed their students to have a device. And this is where one device is issued per student. It could be a MacBook, it could be an iPad, but it is that student's device only. And then the last scenario we're going to be talking about is a lab. So I know a lot of people are wondering, what are we going to do with our labs that we have at school now that we're in this hybrid? Sometimes we're on campus, sometimes we're not, sometimes everyone's here, sometimes they're not. And so in the lab scenario, we have created some ideas on how you can switch those labs on a dime and make them a flexible learning environment for both of your students and your teachers. All right, so let's go ahead and see this in action. We're going to start with the shared lab situation. Your MDM can help your lab be flexible. Let's say, for example, you have decided that you are using your lab for a 3D printing lab, and it has all the software that your students need to create their designs, and it's set up to connect directly to your 3D printers. You can unscope the 3D printing app and whatever you need for that 3D printing situation to then scope a testing configuration profile or some other configuration that you need. Maybe it has testing apps on it. You can create this and have the ability to then build an assessment environment where you could do things like turning off the camera or turning off predictive typing and spell check. You could, in that profile, you can create a payload that says limit the sites that this student can get to. Another thing that I like to do too is maybe you only wanted a couple of your devices in the lab to be considered a testing device. You can customize that wallpaper on that device that says, this computer is to be used for testing purposes only. And another thing that you can do is you could push out web clips. So let's say there is something that there is a testing app that is available through a URL. You can push that out to the devices in that shared lab so that students are able to access that and only that on that device as well. So that gives you some flexibility to change from 3D printing profile to a testing lab profile.
Yes, and those lab teachers really appreciate that, Tracy. They really do. Let's now talk about the shared iOS cart models. As Tracy and I have mentioned before, we both have had experience in managing this type of situation. And this is where our JAMF Empowerment Education Suite, we, TNC, have branded this JAMF teacher and student really shine. You can really use the capabilities of setting up your class in JAMF teacher and student, deploying that lesson there out to the students, setting your own restrictions for your students. If you want them limited to just the learning apps that you set up for them, you can do that as the teacher in the JAMF teacher app. If your MDM is JAMF School, if your MDM is JAMF Pro, you do have some capabilities with JAMF teacher and JAMF student, just not the full capabilities of JAMF School. But
one of them, if you don't mind just interjecting about the JAMF Pro, is the setup and reset. And maybe you were just about ready to talk about this, but I love the idea of having, if you have shared iPads, for example, that sometimes live in your media library space, or then they might be carted over to your biology class because they're going to be used with microscopes or something. You can use JAMF setup and reset to create user-based configurations. So depending on where that end user is. I love that idea.
I love that too. And thank you for bringing that up, Tracy. Yes. And there's nothing like that facilitator and the media specialist can not have to worry about a student getting a device that's not ready for them, because that's instructional minutes and time that you can't get back. So that takes care of that as well. And for those of you out there that don't have JAMP teacher or student, you still can use Apple Classroom, which still has those features such as app locking, the focus mode, putting them into the space that you need them in for that instructional time. So both JAMP Teacher and Apple Classroom give you that empowerment as a teacher to do the things you need to do to keep the device in instruction mode and keeps the students focused.
Yep, great. So our last case scenario that we're going to be talking about is hybrid learning. And there's a lot of definitions of hybrid learning right now, and I don't even think that we could probably name them all. But there's some key factors that I think are really important, no matter what model your school is using. And the first one being communication. We need to be communicating not just like internally with your IT department and your teachers, but teachers to students and parents to students and teachers to parents. Like the whole loop of communication really needs to be simplified. And one of the great things about our JAMP school apps is the ability to for teachers and students to communicate whether they are in the same room or not. And students can, if you have JAMP School, students can raise their hand remotely and they can send a message directly to their teacher saying, hey, I have a question about, whatever it is that you just covered. The teacher gets a private message within JAMP Teacher and can answer that question right there in the app. So it's really streamlining and simplifying that communication.
True. And if along with that, we have time, location-based restrictions or profiles, where if the student is within that school day, 8 to 3, 8 to 4, whatever that may be, or location-based, which is around the location services, that's based on location services. If you set that on the back end of the JAMP School MDM, then once the student leaves that location or once that time period is up, then whatever restrictions you have in place, they're lifted and the device is less restrictive as you had set.
Yep, that's great. A couple of things are using your JAMP Pro or JAMP School settings to empower your end user. And we like to call those both like empowering apps and included in that self-service. So for example, let's go back here. For example, we have in JAMP Pro, you have the ability to deploy something called self-service. And self-service is like your own private app store, your school's app store. You can even brand it so it says your school name on it. And you can ask your teachers, what are the apps that you would like your students to have access to so that they can choose what it is that they want to use to present their learning. So you could get information from your teachers that says, what are the 10 apps that you want your students to have choice? Again, that's student-centered learning in presenting their learning. Our MDM empowered apps, including JAMP School and JAMP Teacher and JAMP Pro, also give you the ability to create that learning environment, whether the student is there in the classroom with you or whether they are at home. And the teacher can turn things on and off. They can give access to specific apps. They can even start a class remotely using Zoom and point everybody into through JAMP Student to the Zoom that they're going to be using to teach class. And those are features that are available in JAMP School. The teacher, student, and parent app, and I bet you're going to talk about parent app next, aren't you, Christina? But how the parents can utilize their features right from their phone or their watch to control the device that their student is learning on. So I didn't mean to jump ahead of you there, but
oh no,
go ahead.
no thunder stolen. But because, as she said, they can control it right from their phone or their watch. If there is a learning assignment, whether it's one night or a series of nights, and they notice that their little one, for my own son, he's a gamer, so I have to watch, what he's doing on his iPad or his phone while he's learning. His device is an iPad for learning. Then I have the control using Jamf Parent to put restrictions on that iPad to limit him to just the instructional materials or apps that teacher has put in place. And then I can lift them as a reward for doing his work later. So I think that's awesome sauce for me as a parent personally, and probably all the millions of parents that use this product as well. In addition to that,
that app is available as an iOS app or an Android app.
That is true. Thank you, Tracy. It's on both sides. It is on both sides. Last but not least, app requests is something that I feel is an MDM admin's dream, because how many times have we been in the hallway of a school and Tracy and the teacher stops and says, "Oh, I found this great app and I'd love for you to deploy it to my devices." And we want to, but we, get behind all the other requests that we have received, right? So with Jamf Teacher, yes. With Jamf Teacher, that teacher can actually put those, they can request the app right there. They can go to the app store and they can, with, a procedure, and it's easy, they can use the little the arrow with the box, and they can push that app to Jamf Teacher to request it of the MDM admin. And so now, instead of physical bodies asking you, or pieces of paper, or Google Forms, or however you had set up in your organization prior to you knowing better, now you can use Jamf Teacher and that app request feature to get that. The admin approves it. It includes the number that you needed approved, which should include your students. So then when you come back in for instruction, then you just allot them to your students and you're ready to go.
Yeah, so such a nice feature.
Yes, all of these are great for hybrid learning because, again, you're not restricted to having to have all the devices under one roof, under one Wi-Fi. Not needed. You can have them at home as well as at school.
Great.
So your one big takeaway from this that we want you, if you don't remember anything, is that instead of looking at your MDM as a tool for just setting and forgetting, putting restrictions into place, unlocking the activation lock or the passcode, think of it as making yourself the hero, the IT hero, because you're setting that device up for your end users by way of creating and maximizing the flexibility of your student learning environments. And you're empowering your teachers with the tools they need to keep that learning going. It's nonstop until it's supposed to stop. And by empowering those teachers with the tools they need, it also puts the learning back in the hands of the students, their accountability for their learning, because they decide when, what, when, and how.
Excellent.
Tracy,
nice to wrap it up.
Fun. Yep,
I did too.
Had fun, and I thank them for attending our session. What about you?
Oh yeah, and I'm really excited to see what questions people have ready for us. All right,
Me too.
TNC out.
Oh.